And with me tonight, got my good friends and cohorts here. Peter Stoudinger up in Toronto, and down below, down under here, Diane Hansen and Eric Larson. So welcome to you guys, and welcome to everybody out there. Uh, this is the place to be if you're afraid to fly, or if you know somebody's afraid to fly, or if you just like to talk about airplanes and COVID-19 and anything else that seems to come up that keeps us out of airplanes lately. Uh, we do this show every week, and we would love you to drop by, leave remarks for us there, ask questions if you have it, and whether you're watching the replay or you're watching us live, stay tuned and stay connected to us. Okay. We always mention joining our Facebook group, which is called FearlessFlight Birds of a Feather. And that is a group that we put together on Facebook by invitation. And all you got to do is say, hey, I'd like to join. And we will put you in it. It's a great resource, both to leave tips for people and helpful hints and confidence and encouragement, and also to pick up the same. We monitor that ourselves when we see topics that can use some expertise or some encouragement, and there's a lot of group activity there as well. So please consider joining that. Tonight we've got a poll question for you, as we always do. We're going to do the aviation news roundup first, and then we have a little bit of a surprise for an event coming up and a new launch for a new free product that we're going to pass out there, and that's what you see in number 4. It's a new audio program that we've got coming out. So the poll question for the week is mindfulness, and we're because that's kind of a theme here tonight. We would like to know, we're curious if you're watching live, if you'd put an answer in the remarks there, or if you're watching the replay. Do you practice mindfulness? And yes, number 1 is yes, regularly. Number 2, yes, occasionally. Number 3 would be no. And number 4, I don't know what mindfulness means. So if you would take a look at that and leave us an answer there. So, okay. We had an accident in the news, and Eric and I actually kind of debated whether or not to bring this up because we don't want to steal the thunder from COVID-19, for crying out loud. But seriously, we felt that it should be appropriate there, because we know some of you can't stay away from the news there, even if it is halfway around the world. This accident here was Air India, I believe. It was a 737-800, Eric, was it?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the smoking hole, and that may trigger some of you out there. Why don't you talk a little bit about the circumstances there, Eric? What was going on there?
Well, the crew is approaching the airport that I'm not going to attempt to pronounce because I didn't practice it enough today, but in fairly heavy rain. And I didn't know if it was squalls or windy or anything like that, but I know it was raining fairly heavily. And they did at least one go around or misapproach, which was good if they weren't stable. And then they attempted the landing. And the two things that make the landing there really tricky, besides the heavy rain, are that the airport is built on top of a mesa, sort of like Sedona, Arizona, if anybody with us is from out here. It's on a flat tabletop, because that's the only clear flat place there is. So having an edge at the end of each runway makes it a little more hazardous, and also makes wind judgment strange, because you can have upslope or downslope wind shearing right on and off the edge of that plateau near the runway. That was problem number 1. And problem number 2 is it was raining pretty hard. And the runway service, most runway services in a good part of the world are asphalt, or if not asphalt, domed and grooved, so that water runs off them and runs down the grooves in the runway to allow the airplane tires to get maximum tractive effort in the event of attempting to stop. And apparently, from what I could tell from this service, it was just hard concrete and flat, which tends to really pool water. And in the event of standing or pooled water, the airplane is subject to hydroplaning or skidding, just like your car would. And the FAA advises in most of the performance manuals for single wheel airplanes like the 737 or the 320, advise that for a wet runway landing distance, for planning purposes, you have to up the landing distance by 60%. So that put them with a total amount of pavement available of 9,300 feet, which is a decent amount of length, but 9,300 feet and an average landing distance in the 737 at maximum weight is around 5,000 feet. And then if you bump that for the wet correction, that comes to around 8,000 feet. And that isn't 8,000 total length. That's 8,000 feet after you get the tires on the pavement, spoilers deployed, and start braking. So they really did not have very much elbow room with those conditions to get the airplane down and stopped on the runway. And unfortunately, on the runway, in this case, meant on the top of the hill instead of over the side of it. Which just
Eric, I got an idea. Okay, so would you say that this falls in the human factors realm? Probably.
Sure.
So
I'm sure you're sucking me in on this.
Was there likely anything that was wrong with the airplane?
Well, I'm going to guess no.
Okay, so the airplane did its job, right? So then that brings it back to who probably caused the problem, and that was the pilots. Okay, and just to kind of summarize the last 50 years, yeah, I think it's 40 years of aviation, when we started to look at the fact that even though we as an industry are the safest way to travel in the world, 2/3 of the time when we have those rare incidents or accidents, it was usually a failure on the part of some human breakdown. And because the pilots are the last two in the chain leading up to an accident, we are the most often the ones that can either make it or break it. And frankly, sometimes things happen and you're pretty much a victim of circumstances. But this was clear, well, I'm going to say clearly, very likely not the occasion. So let's say you and I were flying that airplane, Eric, okay? You want to be left seat or right seat?
Oh my God, you're baiting me.
Yeah, I am. We're not. I'm hoping you'd say it doesn't matter because we're a team. And no matter, because either one of us could be flying, right? We can, unless it was minimums and there are some restrictions where the captain has to fly the approach. But typically in rain, then either one of the pilots can fly it, right? So you and I are flying. What are we going to do when we take off? Are we going to have any idea that there might be weather at the destination?
Sure, I'm forecasting very accurate to a small position, and we are probably fueled for it and figure it's highly likely the conditions that are there are highly likely to be there when we show up.
Okay, are we going to check our brains at the dispatch though? And we're going to say, okay, we're committed to go and land. No, we're not. We're going to talk about it all along the way, right? And when we get half hour out or so, if the weather was kind of shaky, what would we do then? I'm going to be the first officer.
It's good you mentioned that because the two of us are fighting like the chipmunks. There's actually a third brain there, and we can contact dispatch and say, here are current field conditions. Can you get us a landing assessment, a current landing assessment right now with the physical conditions on the airport, so we can have an exact number in front of us for what we can expect performance-wise and get that from them.
Okay, so we're going to press on in, and when we get about 15 to 30 minutes out, we're going to brief the approach. What does that mean, Eric?
Well, we're going to talk to each other about what runway we're going to use, which instrument approach we're going to use to that runway, how we're going to make the transition to approach, if approach control vectors is on or we have to get there ourselves, a flap setting we're going to use, anticipated stopping distance, amount of auto braking we're going to use, where we think we're going to turn off, and if we have to miss the approach, the first 2 or 3 steps of where we're going to go. We're going to power up, go straight out. We're going to turn right, turn left. What are we going to do if we miss the approach?
So we got two of us there, and let's just say you're flying the approach and I'm your helper. Okay, I am your number one backup system. So we brief the approach so that I know what the hell's in your mind before we start, right? Okay.
Right.
And what we found in other cultures and in previous histories of the United States aviation is that there was not a lot of give and take, not a lot of dialogue between the two crew members, so that Eric in the old days might have been flying the approach. As he's coming in there, I might have been uncertain as to exactly what he was doing. And at the worst case, when he's about to touch down, and I might have thought he's long, we got a wind shear or something like that. I have no idea what his plan is. So that's the first time when I may say something. And in the old days, unfortunately, under the right circumstances, or we might say the wrong circumstances, I didn't say anything. So I'm guessing that when they play back the cockpit voice recorder, they do have that. They recover the black boxes and the flight data recorder. They're going to look at that. And the pilots both perish in the crash. But what they're probably going to hear in there is some uncertainty, or maybe even worse, no dialogue at all. So nobody's talking to each other, and they didn't make the decision until it was down there and they were past that.
I would guess that's true. What'll even be more interesting is to hear the dialogue between the two on the missed approach that they did conduct. When they did miss the approach, who decided, what did they say, what did they talk over before they went back for another swing at it? That'll be.
So there's a couple questions that fit perfectly what you just said, Eric. So they had a miss approach. Susan is asking, well, what other options, right, would they have had available, other than trying again and making it or breaking it, right? So
okay, Eric, let's pretend we just made a missed approach, and let's just say we missed because we were too far down the runway when we saw it and had a good landing picture. And you said go around, and I monitored the thrust, you monitored the airplane and flew the airplane. We get up there, then our first thing was going to say, I'm guessing we'd say, hey, you want to do this again, right? We talk about it. So
we discuss that was a real good decision that Ron made if he's flying. So that's really good. Didn't try to quote unquote save it, which is how an immense number of crashes occurred back in the day, trying to salvage the approach, as we say. So we're going to go around and say, do we want to do the same approach? Is this still the most favorable runway for winds? And what fuel level are we both comfortable with continuing to try before we proceed to an alternate airport, a filed alternate airport, or if our filed alternate is turning around and going back to the origin to turn around and give up. But we have to talk over how, just like holding, how much fuel are we comfortable with remaining on the airplane so that if the landing doesn't work out and doesn't look like it's going to work out, we cease trying and leave. Because we have to know that we have enough to go somewhere.
So directly answering Susan's question is we already had an alternate. We knew how much fuel we could burn down to even before we left the ground on our departure. But when we got up there, we updated it. And when we did the missed approach and we took off, and now we're flying around deciding whether we're going to come back or not, I know I'm going to be on the radio. I'm going to be talking to Tower. Say, hey, Tower, is anybody getting in? In this case, it's rainy and stuff like that. So it can change dynamically in just a minute or so. Even if it's fog, sometimes you'll get a dynamic change. But we're going to be talking to everybody, getting all the information we can and making a decision. All on the one hand, we're looking at fuel. That is I can guarantee you that's the primary thing that I'm going to be looking at, because we don't want to go below the fuel that we have to get us to the alternate airport plus 45 minutes of reserve. All right. And that's key. So that's what it would look like basically. And I'm guessing that they just automatically decided that they were going to go around and land again. So go ahead. And that's not fair.
While you're in the pattern and you're doing that, the first officer can do his super high speed one finger typing in what we call the ACARS, the Aircraft Communication Reporting System, to the third brain again, the dispatch, and say, hey, can we get a different suitable alternate closer if we had one in mind, or can you recalculate our fuel burn to the alternate so that we know exactly what it's going to take when we leave. We can update that information too.
Mm-hmm.
This is the part of aviation when pilots joke, you can't pay me enough. The other times are when you wouldn't even have to pay me because I do it for free. This is the time when we joke with each other. This is the time when this is where we earn what we're paid for. So that's in a nutshell. That's what happened on that. And so let's talk about you next time you fly. Should this come up, because now you're gonna have this in the back of your memory. And it's going to come out and it's going to jump out at you from time to time, like it would for, even if you had a moderate fear. So what's the difference between you and those poor people on that airplane, the ones that perished, and the two pilots, in fact, is that chances are you're probably going to be flying on domestic U.S. aviation. And I don't mean to throw stones at anybody, but we have high standards, and we kind of wrote the book on human factors. Certainly the Western world did in aviation, and the things that Eric and I just discussed, we started talking about those earnestly and in a real serious fashion 40 years ago. So that's where we are. We looked at the culture. We looked at the relationships. We said, we had this problem years ago where I might be a new guy. Eric's been at the airline for a long time. Even though I might be experienced, I might have been reluctant to bring something up with Eric. I didn't want to hurt his feelings, or I didn't want to, make him mad at me or anything like that. We have now trained for over 40 years, and we've gotten that out of our system, so that we don't worry about that. And we've talked to captains in particular. They get specialized training and say, hey, just because you're the boss of the overall success of the flight doesn't mean you're the boss over whether you override safety concerns, things like that. Okay, so we have a team effort up there, and as far as the flight attendants in the back, we would have been talking to them as well, telling them where we're at. We probably wouldn't have talked to them right as we're going around. It might have taken 5 minutes or so before we jumped on either the PA if it was real short of time, or if we had a little bit more time, we'd pick up the interphone and call Diane in the back and say, here's what we did, here's what we're planning, and if you got any questions or anything like that. So
let me summarize some of the comments that came in and some of the questions that happened. So what I heard you say in the beginning, it was based on all the available options, it may be that most likely it was a human factor / communication issue that may have contributed ultimately to the crash, rather than a failure with some part of the aircraft. I mean, that's what I think one of the questions was. And I think I mentioned that before. Could the pilot have done something different? You guys played through a whole bunch of scenarios. Now the question is that what you were talking about is the standard on tier 1 kind of countries or airlines. It was a low-cost carrier in India, an emerging market with maybe not exactly a lot of oversight or control. So, are these things, as much as we can anyways, but there are standards internationally that can reassure travelers that flying with airlines, there's a standard in training, correct, Eric?
Yeah, well, we can put into perspective that the odds of dying in an airplane crash in a tier 1, that means US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Western Europe, Japan, even China, are 1 in 33.2 million. That is up from even just 15 years ago. And then there's tier 2, which is, I think, 1 in 11 million maybe. The lowest tier 3, 1 in 7 million, which is where this Indian airplane would have fallen into. But bear in mind, the odds of dying in a crash in a tier 3 country are better than what it was in the US 30 years ago. So everybody is improving, and sadly, you've heard me say this time and again, we're never going to get rid of accidents and incidents in the airlines. The best thing we can do is make sense out of these, and I guarantee you that airline will have some serious questions and serious things to ponder over the outcome of this accident.
And I think the question that came into Dieter is there supervision? And we should just mention that in the rest of the world, besides the US, there's an agency called the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, and ICAO regulates and makes rules for aviation just like the FAA does. And in fact, the FAA has done a lot to align their stuff with ICAO rules to help international pilots and to help US pilots, and they're operating international. So they're all on the same sheet of music. And I'm sure that ICAO would have been the governing authority here. But directly to the question, how much direct supervision there is there, I don't know. But they certainly would have been operating under those rules, which are very similar, if not identical, to the rules that they would have had in the United States.
Okay, cool. And lastly, I just want to acknowledge Oliver Fry, one of the original
hey, Oliver,
201 online class members, and he just he said that in Burbank, in California, you get these approaches where sometimes the conditions with the Santa Ana winds are such where they have to go around and start fresh, so to speak. So
yeah, really, Burbank has two conditions really. One where the weather is the visibility is relatively good, few clouds and stuff like that, and that's when they have the Santa Ana winds, which is good visibility, but windy conditions, and they have it, and we can only land on 2 runways over there, essentially. And then the other times when they have fog and low visibility, which is also a time when we might have to abort the approach and take it around there. So, okay.
All right, where do you want to go next? Do you want to go?
We'll talk a little bit about COVID-19 indirectly this time. There's lots of articles out there about the differences between the airline recovery between 9/11 and as a result of the coronavirus here. And for someone who was here for both of them, looking back at 9/11, we didn't fly for 4 days, and it took a year for the airlines to get back to the same passenger level that they were prior to that time. And just kind of a footnote to that, between then and 2019, last year, before the coronavirus, I think the airline traffic has doubled, if not tripled, in that time. So the industry in general has grown in a huge way. And the concerns in post 9/11 were fear, but not the kind of fear that you all suffer from. This was the kind of fear worrying about somebody taking control over the airplane, terrorism, and that. Okay, and then the other thing was fares, and so we're really kind of in that same era again. But there's a vast difference between the nature of the fear and the fact that it doesn't look like 9/11 in that case in the recovery. And one of the things, Diane was taking a look at this, and I'll let her comment on a couple of things that she found, and a little bit about her airline and how it's doing, and then maybe Eric and I can throw a little bit in about the larger airlines. So what did you find out, Diane?
And in looking back on it, as you say, it took a little while for the industry to get back to passenger counts after 9/11. It did. It took a while, about a year or so, before the passenger numbers came back up. The industry at that point had some familiarity with screening programs and that sort of thing. Because back, and Ron and I can remember this, in the 60s and 70s, planes got hijacked on not a regular basis, but on occasion. So after 9/11, there were some mechanisms already in place to do a more thorough screening, which obviously was expanded after the events of 9/11. But then again, in about a year or so, things got back to normal. Now there doesn't seem to be an end in sight with COVID-19. There's no way to screen, with putting your luggage through the X-ray machines. There's really no way to screen passengers the same way that we were able to do that at 9/11. And so the fear and the fares, even though the fares are really low, I mean, they're very low right now. People are still afraid of being in an aluminum tube with lots of other people, irrespective of the fact that we're all wearing masks. They're afraid to be in that kind of environment. My airline and several others have gone back to full capacity, and I just finished a 3-day trip over this weekend. And most everybody is doing very well with the masking and such. I did have one passenger who expressed frustration and said that we were being irresponsible. And I appreciate his concern. At the same time, when individuals book their ticket on virtually all the airlines on their websites, they are informing the people on their particular airline whether or not they're booking to full capacity or whether or not they're blocking a certain percentage of seats. So we are very, very much aware of trying to inform our passengers what each individual airline's policies are with regard to the numbers of passengers on the planes. And we are trying as flight attendants to move people if they are concerned. But at this point, all of the flights that I've been on my last few trips have been almost to capacity. And that's the reality that we are living with right now. People still need to get to places. And if they are unwilling or not available or not able to drive or use some other mode of transportation, we're still the way to get there. And so we're hoping to educate all of our passengers as to what the individual airlines' policies are.
Mm-hmm. So this is Captain Ron's opinion about the pandemic. If for those of out there of our followers that took the 201 class, leading up to that, and I'm going to put it back have Dieter put it back in the show notes. I found a guy on YouTube, very, very informed. He's a scientist. He's a biologist by trade. And he put out a really, really good video about a pandemic and why it's important to try to protect yourself as long. There's a lot of really right now, they're just opinions about the fact whether or not everybody's going to get it or not. And he makes a clear distinction between it's not whether or not everybody gets it. It's the rate at whether everybody gets it. And that's why you look at it. That's why it's so important when you look at hotspots. If it's like a snake that swallowed a pig in terms of an outbreak, you can exceed the capacity to provide healthcare for those people who really need it. There's no doubt that there are people out there who are not in high risk. And to me, one of the things that's interesting about this is the way that the knowledge is shifting. It's going to be very different what we know about this in a year from now, for sure, than what we know now. But during this uncertain time in here, you want to try to delay getting it as long as possible. So, it's really like, holding a gun up to your head if you're a rebel out there and say, don't move or I'll shoot myself, okay? Because if you get it and you happen to be getting it at the same time as another large group of people, you could, in fact, if you ended up needing special care, you could end up dying while you're waiting in line to get in to see it. And I don't mean to be alarmist or anything like that. To me, it's just common sense. If you can do something simple like wear a mask and restrict your exposure or the people around you's exposure, why would you not want to do that? And that's where it was coming from last week. Why would you not want to do that? Why would you want to take a chance that either you or somebody you love will come down with it when the threat is high and you end up in a hot spot? I mean, that's what we just went through with the states down here, and now it's migrated back to the Midwest. Again, one of my favorite quotes, Stephen Covey says, nothing breeds failure like success. And in pilot accidents, Eric and I were talking about the Air India crash. I guarantee you one common thing on those pilots' mind before they took off that day is neither one of them had the thought, that this could be the last time that they ever flew an airplane.
Right.
Because they've never had that experience before. That's why it's hard to keep pilots alert and diligent and vigilant, because as aviation has become safer, the very fact that by odds of dying in a plane crash are 1 in 33.2 million today can also contribute to my being in an accident tomorrow, because I can't afford to stop doing the things that seem so ridiculous on a larger scale. We're not going to lose an engine. We're not going to have weather. We're not going to land on a crowned runway, and the water is going to be just right with the amount of rainfall to give us zero braking on that. No, I have to operate all the time as if the worst case scenario was there. So anyway, enough said.
So just want to add with regard to that with our passengers because there are a lot of people who have to fly at this point. They have to go places. One of the interesting things that is different between now and 9/11, subsequent to 9/11, is that so many of the places where people would be flying to in the past are closed. So there are a lot of resorts or vacation experiences or business meetings or what have you are not open. And so that has adversely affected the passenger counts that we are seeing. But there is still that core percentage of individuals that have to get somewhere. And then in conjunction with these individuals that have to get somewhere, because of the reduction in the number of total passenger count across the board with all the airlines, we have reduced the number of flights, for example, in and out of a particular city, of a particular market. So instead of having 4 flights to a particular city, and each flight maybe has 55% capacity, we maybe only have 1 or maybe 2 at tops. So they're full. And so individuals who are going to be flying somewhere are going to see on many airlines full planes, because that's might be the only plane that day to the location that they want to go to. And so it is incumbent upon us as an airline and flight attendants and the gate agents, and also on our passengers, to observe the requirements, the masking requirements that we are, and the airlines and the airports themselves are imposing, which also means our announcements have changed just this past week, so that people can't just get on a plane and give their kid a lollipop, and the kid uses the lollipop for the entire course of the flight and doesn't wear a mask. So there are a lot of fine-tuning things that are going on with the airlines to ensure that people are not circumventing the rules, because that does have a very adverse effect on the rest of the passengers.
Yeah.
Okay,
two
let's
comments
go to slide
that
number 8
Ron,
here. Let's go to slide number 8.
Yeah, Ron, 2 things. First of all, I have put the paradox of pandemic
Okay, cool.
in the comments, so that can be watched right from searching the comments. And then I just wanna publicly, Jim said his cruise was canceled in October, unfortunately, so he can't fly on his first 787 experience. So we'll have to wait, Jim, to get you on some other 787. So
You'll do it, Jim. If anybody can do it, you will.
Yes, he will. Okay, slide number 8 coming up.
Okay, how do you get over a fear of flying? You change the way you think. The difference between you sitting in a seat and Eric or I or Diane or Dieter sitting next to you is the quality and the content of what you're thinking. Okay, whether it's I'm going to freak when they close the door, or whether it's, I'm afraid of turbulence, it doesn't matter. You've got to change the way you think about flying. And one of the elements or the ingredients of that is actually learning more about airplanes and flying, so you can understand what all those sights, sounds, and sensations and circumstances are that can come up in flying. And that helps, but it's typically not enough for the average fearful flyer. And so what you have to do is you have to get into practicing mindfulness. And so I have been Yep, I have been neglect over all these years because it's more fun to talk about airplanes and flying, and less fun because some of you think that I'm kind of weird, like I did when I first started doing mindfulness, to talk about mindfulness. But we are going to change that. And it's going to start this Saturday because we're going to have a special launch of a program for that, and it's going to be free. So what I want to do is I'm going to tease you with what mindfulness and all that, but basically it's paying attention to where your attention is. So imagine you're there, you are sitting in the seat next to Eric or I or Dieter or Diane, and we hit some turbulence. What's your mind doing? It's thinking about, oh, the pilots are going to lose control. Oh my God, I'm going to freak out. I'm going to embarrass myself. The airplane's going to flip over. We're all going to die. Okay, what are the four of us thinking about? Well, I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat when I get to the destination, because that's the way it's great. So we're thinking about anything but that. So the first step, which is the basic part of mindfulness, is to pay attention to where your attention is. You have to know that. You have to be aware of that, because otherwise your mind goes off on autopilot. So being mindful, and part of that is meditation. That's a subset of mindfulness, is to pay attention where your attention is, and then some of the other benefits. And I just want to highlight this. We're going to talk a lot more about these in the launch when we do that this Saturday. 5 things that this isn't just what mindfulness does. This is the way it changes your brain. Literally changes your brain. It reduces stress levels. Okay, and that is to say that you improve your ability to manage stress in stressful situations, like booking your flight, or being at the gate, or being on the airplane in turbulence. Another benefit is it helps you increase your focus. It helps you narrow your focus and keep from getting distracted. So if you were thinking about all the fun you're going to have at Disney World, and you hit turbulence, this helps you, 1, get back to it, lower your stress, but 2, help you focus, refocus, and take control of your attention. Put your attention where you want it rather than where your survival instinct wants it. A third benefit, it improves your emotional fluency. What the hell is that? Emotional fluency is the ability to move easily from one level of emotional arousal to another. That's what people with resilience do. You do it already when you're in traffic. You get startled by somebody slamming on their brakes in front of you. You recover from that. You don't think about that 4 or 5 months or 4 or 5 years after that, like, oh my God, what if? No, you were in control. You saw it develop. You can't do that in an airplane because you don't know enough about flying, and you don't know enough about flying. What can I say? So you need to do that, and that's part of it. Mindfulness helps you notice your emotions and learn how to manage them better. 4th benefit, increases your resilience. And it again, whether it's turbulence, door closing, or anything like that, anything that helps freak you out, mindfulness helps change your focus and improve that. And the last thing, and this is probably one of the most remarkable ones, it actually improves your state of well-being. And so people actually live better lives. A lot of people who have some insight about mindfulness think it's just to make you feel calm and all that. No, not at all. It's to start with helping you identify where your attention is when you're upset. And it just isn't for flying. It's for all of your life. I've been doing this for 30 years now, and it really does change the way I think and approach things. It doesn't prevent me from getting upset sometimes. It doesn't prevent me from having a lot of joy in my life, but it does make my life richer for the experience. So on this Saturday, we're going to have a special launch. We're going to do a special Fearless Flight Live. And if you want to run that slide up there, Dieter, it's going to be this Saturday, August 15th at 11 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. So it'll be 3 hours later in the East Coast. We're gonna to introduce this. We're gonna talk in depth about mindfulness, and we're gonna have multiple downloads, actually audios that we've created to get you on the right path and get you moving towards your fear of flying. So,
Ron, is it fair to say we're actually doing that when we're pre-flighting the airplane? We're busy, we're focused.
Absolutely.
We're doing that stuff. As we're not aware we're doing that. Was one of my favorite ex-presidents used to say, we're doing it subcutaneously. And even though the other guy says, when do you want to eat? You just blow through that because you're focused on the route and the other stuff and you don't worry about it. And then the A flight attendant comes in and says, when do you guys want to eat? And you just keep blowing through that because you're focused on what you're doing, not the other stuff, like when you're going to eat.
That's amazing that you mentioned that, because one of the things I'm going to talk about Saturday is that, well, you and I did it tonight. We ran a little scenario. We pretended like we were flying that flight into India. What would we be doing? That is mindfulness. It's paying attention to where our attention is. It's saying one or the other of us says, hey, Eric, pay attention. We got some adverse weather coming up here. It's not another day at the beach. And so we use that all the time. Believe it or not, the simulator is an artificial tool that we use to develop mindfulness in pilots. Now, if you called it that, the pilots would probably get all freaked out because they don't like woo-woo stuff and all that. But that's really what we're doing when we go in the simulator. We're running through scenarios. When I do the advanced class, the 201 class, Eric and I, we sit there and we play pilot and first officer, and we take everybody through a mock flight, chair flying, we call it, as if you were in the airplane. And that's one of the things we teach you how to do as well. So we're going to give you the first steps to mindfulness in this new PMP course. I forgot the acronym right away, but we're going to do that, and we're going to start it this Saturday. We hope you'll join in with us. Like I said, the price is right; it's free, and we hope that you'll pass the word on to anybody else out there. So if you're live on this and you got friends that are afraid to fly, please pass it along, or if you watch the replay here. So Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 o'clock. Eastern, we're gonna do this, and again, it's gonna be a lot of fun. It's gonna take this to a new level for anybody, even if you're flying more comfortably now. There's gonna be good information in there for you and stuff that you could put on your iPhone or your Android. All right.
I'm gonna throw one thing into not only the pilots but the flight attendants with regard to being focused. When we get on the plane, the morning, afternoon, whatever, and it's the first time we're flying it. We have a pre-flight check that we have to do depending on your forward aft. And nothing changes my focus than making sure all my emergency equipment is working, that everything is there that should be there. And then when you are taking us down, when we're taxiing, we're reviewing something called CLUE, commands, lights, usable exits, usable passengers, and emergency equipment. So that's on occasion, someone starts talking to me and I look at them, I said, please don't talk to me, because I am focused. Because when we are rolling down the runway or when we're getting ready to land, I am going through scenarios of all the stuff that could possibly happen and what do I do? And the forward flight attendant, both forward and aft, we are going through in our minds, if this happens, what do I do? What commands do I give? So like you say, we may be chatting and having a great time, but there are moments when we are absolutely laser-like in our focus on what our responsibilities would be in case something went bad.
And it's only appropriate we're going to give Diane the last word.
Well done, Diane.
Thanks for tuning in. Come and find out how the pros do it. Mindfulness for everybody, and one size fits all. No, this is how you learn how to build a plan. Come and find a significant way to build your own flight plan to overcome and improve your ability to overcome your fear of flying. So thanks to Dieter, Eric, and Diane once again for this week. Thanks to you all. We'll be back next week for another episode of Fearless Flight Live. Have a great week and stay safe.
Good night.